like Miami. Miami, 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 Miami.
There it goes.
It feel like Miami.
All right, welcome to the Heat Beat podcast. I think that's the first in our show's history where intro music cut off midstream. So shout out to StreamYard for doing that for us. I want to just talk real quick. Shout out to everybody that's tuning in live on Twitch. I know we haven't been doing consistent pods daily like we used to during the season. There's a good reason for that. The Heat are no longer playing. We need a break, but there's still lots to talk about. There's Dame trades and lots of cap stuff that we can get into, and no one better to talk about that than a man that I actually invited on the show for his first time, his maiden voyage on the Miami Heat Beat podcast. None other than Yossi Gozlan of, was it Hoops Hype or what's your
Yeah, Hoops Hype.
Hoops Hype. You also have the podcast with Michael Scotto that I was actually listening to recently. You guys do a good show as well there. How's it going? Tell me everything that's going on with cap news that you've been doing lately, because obviously this is your time to shine right now. This is your season.
It was my time. It's interesting. Just it's like 2 weeks, and then that's kind of it. So did my thing, and now I get to relax a little bit.
All right. Well, let's get right in there because I know we only have you for a little bit of time. Obviously, Miami's off season is kind of like in a standstill still as we find out what happens with Damian Lillard. There's lots to kind of speculate on, and I think we're going to do a lot of this stream talking lots of like hypotheticals. So whatever we say on this stream may or may not happen. So don't get your hopes up all the way. But I feel like what the purpose of this stream is going to be is kind of just pointing out things that Miami potentially can do, or at least what they're monitoring as they assess, multiple trade proposals when they're putting together these packages for superstar players, and in particular right now for Damian Lillard. So as we get into it really quickly, Yossi, what do you feel like Miami needs to accomplish if they make this Damian Lillard trade? Is it more balancing the second apron more than anything else? Is it kind of figuring out how much of the rotation that they need to keep without sending out every single asset in their cupboard? Because right now it doesn't seem like they have a whole lot with the 2 first-round picks, but there's more that they could potentially unlock, with potentially future trades that they might be able to accomplish by sending Tyler Herro to their third team, or potentially amending a pick situation with OKC that they have currently at the moment with their 2025 protected first-round pick. So what do you think Miami should accomplish, or what do you think are the priorities as they kind of still monitor this Dame situation?
I think they're just trying to get the deal done, really. The have historically been one of those teams where they can worry about the other stuff later and do that pretty successfully. Like the salary cap stuff, they have always managed to figure things out. Even after all the spending they did in 2016, 2017, they're still able to get Jimmy Butler 2 years later.
Oh, God. Don't remind me of that offseason.
Yeah, well, being over the tax, like they'll figure it out. And
they're still paying for it. Technically, they're still paying for that Jimmy Butler. Well, that 26 to 2017 offseason, had they not given Tyler Johnson that contract, and then they kind of like made that trade for Ryan Anderson, where they kind of saved a little bit. At least they saved themselves from the luxury tax bill that season. But they still had to waive and stretch him. And because they were like teetering on the hard cap that year where they tried to land Jimmy Butler in that sign trade, they're still paying for that first round pick that they sent the Clippers when they unloaded Mo Harkless. And that's one of the reasons why they can't send 4 first-round picks, or even 3 really right now.
Yeah, that's true. But I mean more like the fact that they, after that 2016 or was it 2017 season, I think the 2017 season when they were supposed to be pretty bad and they ended up almost making the playoffs, and they decided to pay Dion Waiters and James Johnson. I'm sure those are non-names. Heat fans, they probably cringe a little bit when they hear them. But like they managed to get out of that hole and still get Jimmy Butler, still later put together a pretty good team, and they've really cleaned up their roster and their cap since. And then the other thing you're mentioning, do they need to have a roster ready, prepare their minimums? Because, if they get Dame, they're probably going to be pretty deep in the tax. I think with the Heat, another thing we all know is that they know how to find first round level talent out of nowhere. They know how to identify certain guys. And I'm sure there's probably some guys already on the roster we're not thinking too highly of, and at least one or two of them could end up being prominently in the rotation next year. And I would assume that if they get a Dame trade done, they'll probably trade all 4 maximum picks they're allowed to trade, do work something out with OKC or get another unprotected first that lets them trade 4. And when, like, most teams historically, those types of trades don't work out for the team getting the star.
Right.
But the Heat, that they're gonna find like a first round level talent later on every year, really, like almost every year. So I think they just need to get the deal done, and they'll be able to figure out the other stuff later.
Okay, so let's get into that. So you're talking about potentially trading up to 4 first-round picks. Talk about how exactly that happens. I know I mentioned on the podcast before, it would require them. It doesn't even have to require them amending that pick situation with OKC. As I tweeted out, I think like 2 weeks ago, it could require just getting an extra first-round pick that's in 2025. Now, if they get a different first-round pick in any other season, then yeah, it would require amending that OKC pick. But can we talk about a little bit of how that would work in terms of trading 4 first-round picks, maybe without needing OKC's assistance to unlock another unprotected first, or how that would work for Miami?
So right now, it's been a while since I looked at this, but I'm assuming they can only trade 2 firsts right now.
Yeah, 2028 and 2030. Yeah,
so that's the max. And the reason for that is because they owe OKC a 25 first. And the reason they owe that to them is because they previously owed a 23 first, and they ended up swapping to get the 23 back. They gave them a 25. So now they can trade 24 through 27, I think. Something like that. So one thing they could do to open up more of their picks would be if they got their 25 pick back from the Thunder. And something I just kind of proposed on Twitter is the Thunder would probably like another future first out if they're going to send the Heat back to 25, maybe something in 2030. And then that can open up the Heat to trade another first.
Okay.
Because then you're undoing the Stepien complications between 24 and 27. Now you're basically able to trade, I believe, 3 between 24 and 28, I think. This basically you open up another thing.
Well, as you know, like Andy Ellisberg,
that's
I'm sure
the first thing they could do, and then there's something better they could do.
Yeah. So like that's what I was thinking. Like Andy Ellisberg, obviously he's planning different steps. I know there was a report from 5 Reasons from Greg Sylvander saying that Miami was positioning itself, or that they have been positioning themselves to unlock 4 first-round picks if they need it. I don't know if they're going to be willing to trade 4 first-round picks. Historically, Miami's actually never, I was looking at this the other day, they've never actually traded more than 2 first-round picks in any trade for any star that they've acquired. It seems like every time they get a star, they get them discounted. Like if you go back to the Lonzo Mourning trade, Tim Hardaway, both of those combined, I think they only gave up 1 first-round pick. If you go to the Shaq trade, they only gave up 1 first-round pick as well. You go to, obviously the big 3 signings when they got LeBron James and Chris Bosh. That was an interesting sign trade situation where they kind of could only give them 4-year deals, and they wanted 6-year deals, but they still had opt out that after 4 years, which didn't, exactly, didn't work out for the Heat. But in order to make that trade work so that they can get those on 6-year deals, which no longer is even possible in the CBA, you can only get like the standard contract that you could sign as an outright free agent. So before you used to get like bird rights with them in a way, or at least sign them to like the max deal that they usually could get with the max years before. The NBA stepped in and said, no, that's no longer going to be doable. So they traded 2 first-round picks and 2 second-round picks in both those deals. One to Cleveland, the other to Toronto. And then even more recently than that, Goran Dragic, they traded 2 first-round picks. And then the Jimmy Butler trade, as we were mentioning earlier, they traded 1 first-round pick to get that deal done. So if you're thinking like Miami's trade history and they've only done 2 first-round picks, and there's like not really like a market right now for Damian Lillard, but we've seen what some of these trades have happened in these last few off seasons. You go back to the Gobert, Mitchell trades of last offseason, go back before that with the Harden trades twice. What do you think Miami should send out in terms of draft capital?
I would just assume that they're gonna have to send out as much draft capital as they've got, because the way star trades they've changed so much since, like, for example, the Shaq trade. The Heat gave up some really good players to make up for the value of. I mean, back then they weren't really. I don't think, like in the 2000s, 2010s, they weren't trading stars for picks or if like just a lot of draft picks. Teams wanted players too. Now it's not player centric at all. Now, whenever a team is getting a star, usually they're just sending out whatever salaries are needed, and then the value is all in the picks.
Yeah.
So that just be by virtue of that becoming the new trend, that's probably what they're going to have to end up doing. And it just seems like that's what the Heat are going to want to do, because they're not going to want to trade Jimmy. They're not going to want to trade Bam. It doesn't seem like they want to trade Caleb Martin either. So, yeah, they got Tyler Herro. They've got some young recent first-round picks.
Yeah, Jaime Jaquez and Nikola Jovic, or it's the two.
And then they'll have to make up some draft value. I don't know if there's a way they can get Dame for those players and just 2 and 3 first-round picks. I don't know if that's possible, but obviously that'd be better than sending out all 4.
Right.
But just by looking at the trends of what the star trades have been the past, I guess, since 2019, really, since the Paul George trade or the AD trade, it's going to require draft picks until it doesn't.
When did that start? I was actually trying to think about that. Like, when did that start when teams were sending more than just like 2 first-round picks, even 3? Was that the AD trade? I feel like that might have been like when it shifted. Because before it never used to be that many picks.
Well, yeah, recently, I guess you can look at the Nets Celtics trade. That was the first one as in recent history, and they did it 3 unprotected first, and no one else did anything close to that. I think people were watching to see how the Nets would do and recover.
Yeah.
But then I would say 2019, really, I think the Anthony Davis trade, Lakers gave like 3 first-round picks on top of Ingram and Lonzo and Hart. And then the Paul George trade, that was like...
That's the one. You know what? That might be the one, because that's the one where OKC was able to get like, 4 unprotected first-round picks plus the pick swaps?
3
and that was never a thing. Like, pick swaps and unprotected picks. While that used to be
unprotected from the Clippers and 2 from the Heat that the Clippers had. So 5 first, unprotected first, and 4 pick swaps.
Yeah. And one of them was the ones that still end up getting traded to OKC. So the one that the Clippers got from the Jimmy Butler trade was the 2023 protected first round pick. That was like lottery protected from 2023 to 2025. Yep. So that got traded out to OKC in that same deal for Paul George. Then the KZ Okpala trade from, I think, two seasons ago at the trade deadline was what shifted the protections once from 2023 to 2025. So that's where we stand now. Miami was able to actually use a 2023 pick this season to select Jaime. So in a way, kind of helped them out. I guess just thinking out loud, like, so you see Miami's cap sheet right now. I know there's can we put it up real quick, Pablo, on screen, his website? So this is your website that you run and operate. Tremendous, by the way. I don't know how you got your programming team to put this together for you, but I'm low-key jealous because it's like one of the best websites out there, and I'm shocked it's free. But for the pod listeners that are out there, you should definitely check out capsheets.com. Every NBA team is on here. These are up to date every single day. So if there's any transaction that's out there that's been reported, you can make certain that this website will have whatever contract details that you'll need in order to just keep track of what these teams' cap sheets are looking like. And every single detail is on here. 2-way contracts. You got all the cap holds. Obviously, the trade exceptions are on there at the bottom that Miami has with those 3 between Oladipo, Strus, and Dedmon. And then obviously you have all the different apron levels and how Miami is in terms of how over or under they are on each of the levels, which right now basically they're over every single one besides the second apron, but they're pretty much almost there anyway.
They're basically operating as if they're over it. Yeah.
Yeah. So as you're looking at their cap sheet right now, entering this season, do you think making a Damian Lillard trade impacts them at any point if they go over the second apron?
This season, no. There's very few of the restrictions that are set to be implemented. Very few of them are actually implemented right now. All there really is for this season is no mid-level exception, which the Heat already chose not to use. They still technically could use it if they get enough flexibility. If they dip below
So
the
up to $5 million,
aprons, but all they really did this offseason was sign minimum guys. Either save money, which what they did with the Oladipo trade, and not re-signing Strus and Vincent, and then they brought back Jay Rich, they signed Thomas Bryant, they brought back Orlando Robinson. They did the bare minimum just to keep that, not to hard cap themselves in case a big trade like a Dame trade would happen. Then the other thing is they wouldn't be able to participate in the buyout market, which they wouldn't be able to sign a player who had a salary of the mid-level exception or more.
The full mid-level, right? You're talking about the 12.3 or 12.4, whatever it was this season.
12.4.
Okay.
And so those are really the only two second apron restrictions of this year. Then in the next season, that's when they really start to settle in. All the trade stuff. You can't increase salary in a trade. You can
100% trade match, right? 100%. Right now it's 110%. So Miami can actually make this Dame trade and only have to send out 41.6 million is the number.
Yeah, right now they only need to get within 10%.
Yeah, so it's 41.49 million is how much Miami has to send out. Lillard's making 45.6. So that's like a $5 million buffer just about that they have. Yeah. And then starting next season, you're saying it's 100%. So you have to send out at least 45. You basically have to match exactly his salary and hope. And that actually gets tricky because I feel like going forward, when teams like Miami want to make these kind of swings for a superstar trade, that's going to be hard to trade match because you're basically telling the other team you're going to have to probably take in more money than I'm sending out.
Yeah, and not only that, but they wouldn't be able to trade for Dame next year unless they're trading Jimmy because they can't aggregate players. They can't
exactly.
Trade.
That's a big one.
Yeah, they can't get to that 100% number with multiple guys. There's also the draft pick thing. Well, there's some like interesting draft pick stuff where if you're in it for multiple years, you can have your draft pick 7 years out. You won't be able to trade it, and then maybe falls to the end of the first round.
Yeah.
What else is there? And then you can't use old trade exceptions from the season before.
So that would impact Miami next season because they have the two trade exceptions they got in this offseason with the Strus deal and then now the Oladipo one. So those
actually this one will impact them because if they're going to be over the second apron next year, then, for example, the Strus one and the Oladipo one, they wouldn't be able to use them. Like on July 6th, like once the moratorium ends, are allowed to use it. They wouldn't be allowed to use it to use it on the day it expires.
Got it.
They would basically have to use it up until June, which isn't. Oh, actually, no. Actually, that's not true. If they're going to be over the second apron, or if they're already projected to be over the second apron, they wouldn't be able to use it already in June. I gotta read into it again, but I remember.
I know the CBA just came out. We haven't really fully read every single page, but that is something
that's be able to use it like right before July either. I'll look into it again, but I'm pretty sure.
Well, to your point, it feels like if Miami wants to use these trade exceptions, it makes more sense to start using it this season before the new second apron rules really kick in, or the more egregious ones kick in next season.
And one other that just came to my head is they can't sign and trade a player. And get a player back in return or generate a trade exception. So like they just did with Max Strus. they could sign and trade a guy like him next offseason and just get a pick back or cash back, something like that, but they wouldn't be able to create that 7.2 trade exception or use him towards someone else. Yeah.
Right. So that's actually really interesting because that's something that the Warriors did when they did the trade exception and they got back D'Angelo Russell also, I think, in that same deal.
Exactly. Yeah.
So as we're looking ahead, there's been some reports. Obviously, it's not like crazy official reports, but there's been some ideas flowing out there on Twitter that potentially the longer this Damian Lillard trade situation, draws out over time, that is there a way or a possibility that Miami would want to potentially find a way to keep Tyler Herro if maybe all it takes is 3 first-round picks and they don't need to send Tyler Herro to a third team to unlock, a 4 first-round pick that they could maybe get from that third team. And if that happens, like, how does that impact Miami's cap situation going forward beyond this season? Are they going to be in a second apron team, in future seasons ahead? Because you're talking about keeping a $27 million player that's going to be making more next season. In fact, Pablo, can you scroll up real quick? And can we pull up the 2024-25 season? So next season, Tyler Herro is making $29 million. And then you got Duncan still on the cap sheet at 19.4. You got Bam at 34.8. Then Jimmy starts his new extension at 48.7. So he's going to be making an extra $10 million starting next season. So
Dame's going to be at like 49.
Yeah, Dame's going to be making like 50 million just about.
I'm just going to assume that if they trade Lowry and Duncan Robinson for Lillard this year, and yeah, they would probably be over the second apron with those four guys.
And that's obviously not even counting Caleb Martin maybe even staying. He probably would be gone, but assume he stayed on the roster. There's probably not much of a case that he gets re-signed because that tax bill would be insane if they tried to re-sign him at anything more than his $7 million that he's making now.
Yeah, for the Heat, I think keeping Tyler Herro might be more about keeping the asset if they feel like he will have more value later than those picks that they'd be sending out to Portland. And then you can try things out, see if it's working out. Maybe Herro gets better. Maybe he's awesome next to Lillard. Maybe having Lillard there helps Herro a little bit not get hunted as much because now there's just so many now you got to worry about Lillard more. Yeah, but then also you can do something with him later if they feel like he they need to change things up a bit. Still be able to get something for him.
Well, I guess we could probably have a good example is like what Golden State just did with Jordan Poole. They could try to unload him the following offseason. So they basically have like a 1-year run of what maybe a Herro and Lillard backcourt could look like. And if it doesn't play out the way that they expect it to, then yeah, the next possible move would be moving Herro and sending him for whatever they can get back in return, which it might be at a discount because obviously you're trading him if he's not having a good year probably next to Dame is probably what the assumption is. Or maybe it could just be an ultimatum from ownership saying, hey, we need to cut down this tax bill. You guys didn't make it deep enough in the playoffs, or this isn't going to work moving forward. You're going to have to shed the salary, and the salary that you would have to shed was probably going to have to be Tyler. He's the cap casualty. And that's it.
And assuming they're over the second apron, if they're like way over it, they might only be able to trade him at this point for several smaller salaries. Right. So if they just want to get some depth pieces that they think fit really well around their big three, that might be what they end up doing.
Okay, now let's talk about the likelihood of any of that even happening. Because obviously, like, that's just in theory, hypothetically speaking. But like in reality, do you feel like that's even like a possibility that could be floated out there for Miami to potentially find a way to make this Dame trade happen as it continues to prolong? Or they keep Herro, or do you feel like Herro, in all likelihood, is going to be in his deal? Or he probably should be in his deal because you don't want to put yourself in a situation where you're trying to cut salary and become a second apron team next season.
I just feel like most likely the Heat are going to have to give up just about everything to get Dame. Just seeing him, what the price has been for stars. I think that's the most likely scenario, especially now. I think Caleb Martin's such an interesting factor in these negotiations. He was just so good in the playoffs that them keeping Martin can be used against them in negotiations.
That's
And
true. That is
just
very
like
true.
another thing to tug, like, okay, you want to keep Martin, you want to keep Hakas, all right, well, you're gonna have to give us all your picks in Herro. Obviously that's not how the negotiation is, so I'm just trying to paraphrase what it might come down to.
Okay, so let's talk about some of the trade packages, or at least a framework that you think could work for Miami and Portland, and if it would evolve more than just those two teams, because it seems like at the moment there's not a trade between those two teams that works one for one. So it seems like what needs to happen, and what's been reported from like every single reputable reporter out there, that it's going to require at least three teams and maybe even more than three teams, potentially a 14 deal beyond that. I know there was one theory that you had like about a couple of weeks ago where Miami could like use those trade deals between Strus and Oladipo, maybe use their salaries in aggregation. And I know that didn't happen. I'm so sorry that you wrote that story, and it probably got shattered in like what 12 hours or 24 hours before you posted that.
It was a
But
fun 2 days.
it was a fun theory. Honestly, I was actually believing it because I didn't see any trades pop in at like noon right away. I was like, oh, maybe this might happen. And then like later on, that Strus deal got reported. I'm like, oh, I guess not.
Yeah.
But let's talk about like what are some frameworks that you do like that maybe could get this trade deal done that we could send over to Cronin.
Well, I haven't looked into it recently because when the start of free agency happened and I came up with that, I put that possibility out there. The biggest benefit for Portland was it really would have helped them take back minimal salary, even like potentially take back like nothing back.
Yeah.
Now it's going to be tougher for them to luckily for them, they're under the tax, and any Dame trade they do most likely will get them a little more under. But now I don't think there's any team with cap space now, other than maybe like Indiana, who have like 7 mil or something.
It's not enough cap space to really facilitate, or at least take in enough contract salary to make a deal work.
Yeah, nothing.
You're talking about trying to find a team that has trade exceptions to maybe take back something like that. Which, if I was thinking, like there might be a possibility where if Miami does loop in Brooklyn, that maybe they could send out the necessary salary to take in Tyler Herro's $27 million, which would be what 19.5, because you have that 7.5 million trade buffer. There is a possibility where maybe they could send out two players like Spencer Dinwiddie's $20 million, and there's a $9.5 million that Royce O'Neal makes. They're both players that are expiring contracts, and Miami could take in Royce O'Neal's $9.5 million in their trade exception that they have with the Oladipo trade, since the new CBA rules allow you to take in up to $250,000 more than the value of the trade exception.
That's interesting. So now that there's no cap space and there's no Brooklyn does have some pretty big trade exceptions, but nothing that can help take in a Lowry. I mean, I guess Duncan Robinson, but I don't think they have any incentive to do that. So I would guess that it's going to end up being a 3-4 team deal. I think the best case for Miami is that they're able to get one good unprotected first. First, there's another thing we missed on when we're talking about the pick situation, is that if the Heat want to unlock 4 firsts to trade on their end, they need to get a 25 unprotected first back, either their own or someone else's. And two teams that make sense that have been linked to Tyler Herro are the Nets and the Jazz. Both teams have surplus 25 firsts.
Yeah.
So they could give the Heat one of those, and then that can and they could get Tyler Herro that way. So I think one of the better case scenarios for the Heat is that whichever team trades for Hero is willing to give up 2 firsts, maybe like one pretty good first and one just like okay to meh first.
Like a protected first, like a lottery protected, or like a top 15, 20 protected first, something like that.
So let's say the Jazz, for example.
Well, the Jazz have two. So that 2025 thing you were talking about, I know the Jazz have both Cleveland's 25 first that's unprotected, and they also have one of Minnesota's in 2025 as well.
So let's say they are willing to give the Heat one of those, whichever they value the least. And then they're also willing to trade like another first because they have like, I don't know, 15 extra firsts.
Right.
Just any other first to the Blazers to get Tyler Hero, along with whatever salary matching they got to do. I don't know, Colin Sexton or something. And then the Heat are then able to trade 3 or 4 firsts. So the Blazers get 4 to 5 firsts, plus whatever salaries, young players they can get from the Heat. I think that could get done in a 3-team trade. I think that's what I think might ultimately. That's what I keep coming back to, that kind of trade where Hero extracts enough value to give the Blazers just like an additional first or 2.
Okay. I like that kind of idea. Just trying to think out loud. Like, I know the reports were like the Blazers are really looking forward to getting picks and like potential players, like young players. But it feels like in this situation, like it doesn't seem likely that they're going to get the kind of young players that you usually see get traded out in these kind of star player trios. Like we were talking earlier about Brandon Ingram, Lonzo Ball. Like Miami hasn't been a team that's tanked enough to get those kind of high value first round picks. So like the picks that they have that are first round picks are players that were selected either at the end of the first round or in the middle of the first round, not like lottery players besides Tyler Hero. But apparently they don't like him enough to take him in, especially because he's now entering a new 4-year contract. So as we're looking at like the landscape of the NBA, what are players you think that maybe, because I was actually thinking of a team like Detroit was mentioned in the past. Do you think a player like James Wiseman potentially could find his way over to Portland in a way that Miami could loop them into this deal? Because Chris Haynes had mentioned that in one of his podcasts a few weeks ago, that they were at least being mentioned as one of the teams that could be mixed in this multi-team deal for Dame. Are there any other young players out there that you could think of that the Trailblazers might want, or that he could potentially negotiate to get them involved in a deal to make this deal happen?
If the Pistons got Hero, for example, or whichever,
it might take a first round pick. So like, what did the Pistons gave up? Multiple second round picks, and then they gave up who was the young wing player that they had at the time, Sadiq Bey. So I guess we're thinking like, is there a young player? Maybe Miami sends Jovic out to maybe Portland doesn't value Jovic enough as a young player. Maybe they prefer Wiseman, or maybe Jovic gets sent out to Detroit. Obviously, Wiseman's going to be up for an extension after this year. I don't think he signed one, but he's up for one. He's a restricted free agent, I think, next season. So maybe potentially they value another young rookie contract, especially if they just signed Isaiah Stewart to a pretty big deal. So does it make sense to sign 2, big men to long-term deals, or could you maybe reroute Wiseman, you get back Jovic, maybe a protected first, and then the rest of the picks still go to Portland? Is there a potential way that Miami could loop that in?
That's tricky though to see like who those players are that could potentially be available, what those teams are asking for. One thing that comes to my mind is if it's a team like what the Celtics were doing when they traded Smart, they got 2 firsts back, and then they turned one of those firsts into like 7 seconds or something. A team like them who are gonna be well over the second apron, have big luxury tax payments. Sure. They're gonna need draft picks. They're gonna want to restock their picks. Maybe a team like that is willing to give up something, whether it's a young player that they just aren't totally in on, or even just some veteran player that can be flipped later into a different young player that can get a rear out of the Portland. I think that's something that could be interesting.
Okay.
But yeah, I can't just off the top of my head. I can't say like who are those players that Portland would want. I don't know.
The only other team I could think of is
Right.
just like maybe the Thunder, just because they have to make some hard decisions with the amount of players that they have under contract right now. So
I mean,
maybe there's a
Blazers
way that
need-
some of those young
they-
players could maybe get sent to Portland because they do
Blazers
have the
need
roster spots.
forwards. They need some like good wings, good upside wings. I mean, a big man isn't the hardest thing to get. So I guess I would be looking towards who are those higher
Poku.
upside wings that could be available.
Let's send Poku out to Portland.
Yeah, I mean, OKC's got a roster crunch too.
And then they have the Heat's protections. Maybe that's the way Miami is able to unlock those protections. You help OKC out without having to waive some salary. You send out some of those good picks out, and then you help them out by unlocking one of your future first-round picks of 2026 or something. I don't know. To me, those are like potential ideas where, like, hey, we can help you out. Like, I scratch your back, you scratch mine in a way. So I don't know.
Yeah, I just it's tough though also because they want forwards, but that's the most scarce and valuable position.
Exactly.
So it's easier said than done.
All right, let's actually talk really quickly about Caleb Martin because he, as we've been talking about earlier, he's a player that Miami values a lot to the point where they're trying to hold him in this kind of Damian Lillard trade. There's a comment right there from our chat saying not re-signing Caleb Martin would be a mistake. As you see Miami's cap situation moving forward after the season, he obviously signed that 3-year deal as a free agent last season. But he does have a player option for next season. At his current trajectory, it seems very likely that he would opt out. It almost doesn't seem likely that he would opt in just because he's at an age where he needs to cash in. He's at like 28, 29 years old. He's going to be yeah, he's not young anymore. He's actually like pretty old because he went to college for like 4 or 5 years. And now he's been in the NBA for about 3 seasons as well because he spent the first couple in Charlotte. So as you look at maybe his potential free agency next season, what are some players that you think are in the range of what his future salary could potentially be? And is there a situation where Miami may not want to re-sign him because it just becomes too expensive? Sort of like what happened this offseason with Gabe and Max.
So Caleb's interesting because most of these guys that the Heat find out of nowhere, none of them. We can agree they're mostly not high upside guys. Like what Strus and Vincent just did. You can argue that they might never replicate anything close to that again.
Yeah,
and I think I mentioned in the beginning of the podcast. I think the Heat learned from their 2017 offseason not to get carried away and pay these guys like the Dion Waiterses and the James Johnsons after just 1 year. That it's really just like 1 year of like high level basketball, and you can even Kendrick Nunn, obviously Duncan Robinson. That one there.
Well, they let Nunn walk, so that was one that they actually did follow that same principle we were saying, and what happened with Max and Gabe, where they just let him walk. And
Duncan Robinson, they got burned from that one. So I think that's another recent example where they were more hesitant, even though I think Strus and Vincent are going to have pretty good careers. And I think they're I think Strus is a little overpaid.
Well, Strus is going to be making 14, right? 14 this coming season.
Yeah,
and then
I think Gabe's definitely right to let him go.
Yeah.
Vincent, I think with the years he got, it's okay. But again, I get why the Heat are showing restraint. But back to Caleb Martin, because he seems different. He seems like, okay, he doesn't have insane upside. He's really good for what the Heat does, but also just he just seems like he can fit on a lot more teams, and he just seems a lot different from all these other guys I just mentioned. I would imagine he's going to for sure double his salary, at least. Comparable salaries, it's just tough to say because the cap's still going up.
It's projected to go up 5% next season, right? That's the current projection.
For now, 5%.
Max is going to be 10%, no matter what.
Yeah, that's the rule. But like a comparable player, I can't really think of one, but I would if he has another strong season like this, I would imagine he's going to double his salary at least, maybe get something in the 15, 16 mil range. And that might even be considered too low just based on how much the cap is going up.
Is he any possibility that he makes anything close to what Bruce Brown just got?
Well, depends on the years because Bruce Brown basically got like a 1-year deal. But
it would depend on like what teams have cap space too that would want to go after him, I'm sure.
Yeah, maybe someone wants to just do that to mess with the Heat, like the 1-year mega offer, and just see if he takes it. But we'll have to also. I think we also just got to keep seeing how Caleb Barton does now. He's had 2 great seasons with the Heat, so there's clearly something there. Yeah, there's definitely. But does he have? How much more upside does he have? I can't say he has that much more. I didn't even know he was already like 27, 28. I thought he's like 25. Which you don't have that much more upside when you're 25 anyways. But yeah, 27, 28.
He's turning 28 on September 28.
Yeah.
So he'll be 28 in the season.
But also, a lot of the best Heat players just keep getting better and better as they get way older. Like Jimmy Butler just had his best season, like regular season and playoffs at 33, 34. So yeah, I think Caleb definitely does have a little bit more upside, at least, just like a little bit more. And I get why he wouldn't want to trade him. I think he'd be a pretty awesome fit around the other big 3 guys.
Let's talk really quickly also about like just so as we're talking about Caleb, he has bird rights. So if Miami wanted to re-sign him, they could basically sign to whatever deal up to his max. But they are not able to negotiate any kind of extension right now because the deal that he's signed, even though he signed a 3-year deal, he has to play at least those first 2 seasons. And then that 3rd year is when he could sign an extension. So basically, in order for him to sign an extension, he would have to opt in to the 2nd year of his deal before an extension could kick in. Do you think there's any way that Miami could swing that, where they can maybe negotiate under the table, where they tell Caleb, hey, take a 1-year discount, but we're going to pay you after this season. Don't worry.
Like the Clippers, for example, they have that benefit because they took care of Batum after he took a really short deal.
Yes.
The Bucks probably have that benefit because they took care of Bobby Portis after he took a discount. I just can't really identify the Heat having done something like that. We're like, hey, accept this player option or re-sign for the most we could give you, and we'll take care of you later. I'm not. Yeah.
Could you negotiate that extension as soon as he opts in during free agency?
Yeah, I mean,
really before free agency.
Yeah.
You opt in before free agency starts July 1st.
That would be like the Pat Connaughton then. That's what the Bucks did with Pat Connaughton. He took his player option last year, and it was like weird. Like, why would he accept it? He actually had a really good year. He should have gotten offers, and then he immediately extended for whatever they had an understanding on. So I don't know. It's tricky though because I think Caleb would be leaving a pretty big chunk of money on the table. But the guys like Batum, Portis, they had already made a good amount of money.
I guess the only way I could see Miami maybe making that work, and I guess you're gonna have to correct me if I'm wrong. What's the max amount of years you can offer an extension? Is it only 3 or 4, or could they go up to 5 with his bird rights? 4. Maybe that's the way Miami is able to swing that. You give him 4 years. Maybe in the open market he'd only generate about 2 or 3 years. Well, I guess it could be 3 years with mid-level now.
But also his extension though would not be.
It wouldn't be as big, true. It would be what
start him at like, I don't know, 13 mil.
It used to be 120% and went up, right?
Yeah, but it would start him at like 7. Actually, oh yeah, that's right. It would start him way higher. It would start at like 17-ish mil. That's actually it might be worth the conversation.
So I wonder if Miami would consider doing that, because it would help them at least find a way to. Because once you get to that last year, so like say next season, Duncan Robinson's still on the roster, say assuming he's on the roster next season, Duncan, and you have Caleb on the deal that he's currently making, that year that he would maybe kick in as an extension, Duncan Robinson has that clause in his contract where Miami could waive him, and they would save because it's partially guaranteed up until I think July 1st or the start of moratorium or whatever it is, and they could waive and stretch that amount. And sure, they take a dead cap of like a couple of million for 3 seasons, but in a way, it saves them $20 million from taking Duncan's last year in his deal, and then that number gets replaced probably with whatever Caleb's going to be making that year. Maybe that's the way Miami can swing that and maybe negotiate that with his agent. So I think that actually might be something to note moving forward. If that it becomes a possibility, then maybe that's the way they can reason it.
Yeah, I would guess Caleb only agrees to that if he gets a whiff that his market's not going to vastly surpass that in 24 free agency.
Okay.
Then it starts to make sense.
All right. How much more time we got with you? Can we get one more question in?
Yeah, one more.
Okay, one more question. I think this is the one that most players or most fans want to know. When do you think a Damian Lillard trade will happen? Do you buy the reports that this is going to take months and months? Do you think this trade could happen by the end of the stream?
I think we see it maybe a little before October.
Okay.
Or like before training camp.
Before training camp.
Yeah, because if the Heat are just haven't given their best offer yet and are negotiating to that point, I would guess that they're going to want to have Dame in before training camp and just, put all their cards on the table then.
Okay. Oh, this is also good. When is Dame going to get vocal? That might be part of the reason how they get this trade done by October. I think there might be a possibility where Dame talks about his request of a trade.
I mean, isn't he already vocal, like going on Instagram Live and stuff?
Is that? I mean, we're talking like Jimmy Butler going with Rachel Nichols and throwing a tantrum on the practice court before he does that. So
I mean,
I don't know.
He's got his agent literally messaging everybody, "Hey, like Dame only wants to play for the Heat."
Yeah,
I've never seen an agent do that, and I can't recall another agent really like.
Maybe Anthony Davis.
Like that.
I know I know Anthony Davis had, maybe it wasn't his agent, but there were reports that he only wanted to play for Lakers, and I think his dad went on the record saying he would never play for the Celtics. That's only.
But Dame's agent's going on the record saying, Dame's agent.
Yeah.
I'm letting you know that Dame only wants to play for the Heat.
It's usually
you can say that I told you that.
Yeah, it's per anonymous source is usually how that goes. Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Or source close to the situation.
So that's really, I don't think Dame needs to do anything himself. Like, that's really unprecedented. I'm surprised no one's really talking about that his agent is doing that. Like, and, to me, if he doesn't get the trade he wants, I guess he's kind of taking an L to like go out there like that and not get the result you wanted. Again, I've never, unless you could prove me wrong, I don't recall an agent doing something like this.
I can't think of another one off the top of my head, but you might be right. And I know there's always been lists of teams you want to get traded to, but to the extent where, they're going on record saying that I'm calling these GMs, telling them don't trade for my client because there's no point because he wants to play just for Miami. I don't know if we've seen that on the record, like to reporters and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's like every reporter, it's not just like one, it's like every single reporter that's put that out. So even like local and national reporters have put that same quote out.
Exactly.
So,
yeah.
Yeah.
Like
so
when the AD trade stuff was happening, Rich Paul was not going on the record doing anything like that.
He's definitely earning his money. That's what chat says.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to do the stream with us. Anything you want to plug that you're working on currently right now, entering the season?
Not much, really. Doing some stuff on Hoops Hype. As we get into August, things are starting to get a little calmer, I think, for everybody in the NBA media. But yeah, I'm still a little active here and there, posting some stuff. I really don't have too much else to plug. You already gave a nice presentation of my website. So, if whoever needs to just see like the most relevant data to this season and next season for their teams cap wise, just capsheets.com.
How'd you pay for that domain, by the way? Was that like just readily available, or did you have to like bid for that?
I
can't believe that was available. I find that very hard to believe.
I was just trying to come up with something even more clever and something like that I really liked. And then my developer said, "Hey, you should just take this." And I'm like, "Oh, okay. I didn't even know I could just do that one."
That's great.
Yeah.
All right, man. I appreciate your time. Hope you have a good rest of your day. To the rest of the chat, we'll probably come on sometime next week, unless some big trade happens, which obviously we're all hoping that the Dame trade happens soon. I think we're probably just going to take it slow in the pod. A lot of us are trying to take a slight vacation break, but obviously we want to give you guys as much content as we can on a weekly basis still. So hope you guys enjoyed the stream. Continue to check out MiamiHeat.com for any stories and podcasts that we post out there. Check out Hoops Hype and capsheets.com, and we'll catch you in the next stream. Peace.